Wouldn't it be nice if all cities were like Milton Keynes?
What does 17th century poet and civil servant John Milton and 20th century economist and philosopher John Maynard Keynes have in common? It's highly unlikely that either of them ever visited the tiny Buckinghamshire village of Milton Keynes, that can trace its history back to at least the 11th century, and it's named for the 15th. Located close to Fenny Stratford, Bletchley, Stony Stratford and Wolverton, it was chosen over the four much larger towns as the name for the largest of a series of new towns that the then government was building to take pressure off primarily London. But with the convenience of being halfway between London and Birmingham, it was planned to be the first new city, a feat it finally achieved in 2022 when it was awarded full city status in Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee Honours. In the valleys of the Ouse and Ousel, it's only natural that the area has seen human habitation for a long time, with archaeological sites dating back at least 4,000 years. There's also evidence that the area was relatively wealthy, with one of the largest ever hoards of Bronze Age jewellery found in Britain being discovered close to the original Milton Keynes village in September 2000. With a Roman town near Fenny Stratford, Norman manors, medieval market towns and a major railway works for the first wave of railway building, the area has as long a history as any other part of the country. But when you label somewhere a new town, the first image that springs to mind is acres of green pasture converted to cookie-cutter housing estates. Central Milton Keynes, with its grid layout, the outskirts dotted the highest density of roundabouts in England, 3.78 per square mile, its concrete cows, and those red balloon adverts that took advantage of the launch of Channel 4 in the early 80s crashing TV advertising prices, it's a bit of an enigma to anyone who hasn't been to MKC. The 1960s were a time of change and new ideas, so perhaps it's unsurprising that the main road running up the centre of central Milton Keynes, aligning perfectly with the rising sun of the solstices, is called Midsummer Boulevard, flanked on either side by Silbury and Avebury Boulevards. Midsummer Boulevard ends at Campbell Park, a large open space dominated by a ridge that ends the light pyramid, again aligned with the rising sun on Midsummer's Day. And the presence of parks, green spaces and road traffic pushed away from pedestrians is a theme that continues throughout the city, making this one of the most livable spaces for walkers and cyclists in the country. The location of modern-day Milton Keynes is in almost the perfect position in England, shown by just how many important routes through history pass through or by the area the city now occupies. Watling Street, the original Roman road from Dover through Canterbury, London and St Albans to Wroxeter, today shadowed by the A5 road continuing all the way to the Irish seaport at Holyhead on the North Wales coast, runs up the western side of the city. The Grand Union Canal, one of the most important canals of its day, connecting the industrial Midlands and Birmingham to London and the Thames, runs to the east and north. The London and Birmingham Railway, nowadays the West Coast Main Line, the first intercity line to make it to London after the birth of the railways in the north of England, shadows Watling Street to the west. And the M1 London to Leeds motorway, the first intercity motorway to be fully built in the UK, shadows the Grand Union Canal on the east. Newport Pagnell, now absorbed into the ever-expanding city, is home to the UK's first motorway service station. Almost at the centre of central Milton Keynes is the dome of the Church of Christ the Cornerstone, an ecumenical church opened in 1991 that creates a shared space used by Anglican, Baptist, Methodist, Roman Catholic and United Reformed congregations. Whilst most of central Milton Keynes is given over to business and shopping, there is space for the National Film and Sci-Fi Museum, located above shops, just off Silbury Boulevard. The museum houses a large collection of props, costumes, posters and paraphernalia from films and television, with a particular focus on science fiction, including large Star Wars and Star Trek exhibits, as well as Doctor Who. Perhaps it's time to address the concrete cow in the city. Originally created by Liz Laird during her tenure as artist-in-residence in the early days of Milton Keynes, her role was to lead community participation in art. 6 statues, 3 cows and 3 calves, approximately half life-size, were constructed from fiberglass reinforced concrete. The cows have been busy over their life, having changed locations across the city on a number of occasions. They were originally made at Stacey Hill Farm and spent time in the National Hockey Stadium and the Central Milton Keynes Shopping Centre before completing their journey in spring 2016 when they moved to MK Museum, which now occupies the site of Stacey Hill Farm. A second replica set of cows were made by Bill Billings, and these have a more natural environment of being in a field, located close to one of the main roads into the city centre and visible from London-bound slow trains after leaving Wolverton station, which has made this set possibly more famous and certainly more vandalised than the originals. A short distance away from the concrete cows and their links to modern Milton Keynes is a reminder of a much older history of the area, with the ruins of Bancroft Roman Villa. Archaeological excavations have shown that the first building of the site, around the 1st century, was a winged corridor house, but over the centuries the villa grew into a grand building with formal gardens and 4th century mosaics. It's believed the building was demolished around the 5th century, about the same time the Roman army abandoned Britain. Partial excavation of the site took place in the 1970s and 1980s, making it one of the most extensively excavated Roman villas in Britain. To preserve the site, the actual fabric of the building has been reburied, but modern stonework has been placed on the ground to show the layout of the rooms. Bancroft is a short walk away from Wolverton, home to the MK Museum, on the former site of Stacey Hill Farm. The original farm building is still here, forming a main part of the museum, with a number of rooms open showing Victorian period furniture and furnishings for how the farmer and his family would have lived when this was a working farm. The area where the farm is was earmarked to be developed as part of Milton Keynes, but local supporters in the 1970s helped preserve the farmhouse and eventually converted it into the museum it is today. Along with the farmhouse, the kitchen garden is also open to look around. As well as a recreation of an Anderson shelter from the Second World War, where you can experience the sounds of an air raid. Moving back into the museum beyond the farmhouse, additional farm buildings have been joined together to create an exhibition on life in Victorian-era Buckinghamshire. including a mock-up of a street complete with working shops staffed by volunteers in period costumes. There's a working water wheel. A hall dedicated to farm equipment and vehicles. And a gallery of telecommunications, which for someone in their mid-40s is a dangerous reminder of the advancing years, as common appliances in my childhood are now clearly relegated to museum pieces and curiosities. Though I did get to use a rotary phone for the first and possibly last time this century. The transport hall houses numerous exhibits related to transport and travel, appropriate for Wolverton, which had massively expanded and turned into the first purpose-built railway town with the opening of the locomotive works. Being located halfway between London and Birmingham, the town was the location of the main locomotive works for the railway on opening, and for a number of years, the place where steam engines had to be swapped over as they couldn't make the full journey between London and Birmingham in one go. Finally, there's even one of the models showing the development of central Milton Keynes. From the northernmost of Milton Keynes towns in Wolverton to the southernmost in Bletchley. Bletchley Park is perhaps one of the most important places in 20th century history, and for over 30 years virtually nobody knew. Those who did weren't going to say. Churchill called them the geese that laid the golden eggs and never cackled. From initially the rooms of the manor house to eventually a network of huts and buildings across the park grounds where nearly 10,000 people worked away in secret, slowly, methodically decoding, cracking, translating and reporting on Nazi signals. With developments in computing, including the world's first programmable digital computer, Colossus, and the minds of countless geniuses encapsulated by Alan Turing, the codebreakers of Bletchley Park arguably shortened the Second World War. Whilst Hitler thought his communications were so securely encrypted that the Allies would never decipher them, the teams in Bletchley were in fact reading them in real time. With all the secrecy around the war effort, it wasn't until the late 1970s that the role that Bletchley Park played in the war started to become known, and by then the ravages of time were already taking their toll on the buildings. Having passed through various hands, the site was in the ownership of the privatised British Telecommunications. By 1991, the site was nearly empty, with the buildings unused and at risk of demolition for redevelopment. In February 1992, Milton Keynes Borough Council declared most of the park a conservation area, giving a stay of execution from the developers' wrecking balls, and at the same time the Bletchley Park Trust was formed to maintain the site as a museum. In 1999, a lease agreement was reached with BT, giving the Trust control over most of the site, at which point work could fully start on repairing, restoring and commemorating the work that was undertaken on the site. The full restoration project was completed in June 2014, and today a substantial part of the site, including several of the huts, blocks and the house itself, is open to explore. Bletchley Park Manor House dates from the end of the 19th century. In 1877, architect Samuel Liscombe Seckham purchased the estate and built a house there. In 1883, the estate was purchased by Sir Herbert Samuel Lyon, who expanded the house further into a sprawling building of multiple architectural styles. After Herbert's death in 1926, the estate continued to be occupied by his widow, Fanny Leon, until her death in 1937. Following her death, the house and estate were purchased by a builder intending on converting the whole site into a housing estate. But in May 1938, Admiral Sir Hugh Sinclair, the head of the Secret Intelligence Service, today's MI6, bought the site with his own money, just in case they needed somewhere away from London in the event of a war. Bletchley Park was chosen in part as it sat on the junction of the Varsity railway line that ran between Oxford and Cambridge, and the West Coast Main Line that connected London with Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool and Glasgow. With the end of the war, the site was soon vacated, with the Government Code and Sci-Fi School rebranding to Government Communications Headquarters, or GCHQ, and moving first to Eastcote in West London before relocating to GCHQ's current hometown of Cheltenham in the 1950s. Perhaps one of the most significant developments to come out of the site was Alan Turing's refining of an original Polish-designed bomb into an effective and fast way of working out the daily settings of rotors and wirings for plug board of Nazi Enigma machines to allow codebreakers to decode Nazi encrypted messages. A reconstructed bomber is on display in one of the smaller blocks behind the house. On the same campus as Bletchley Park, but separate from the main museum, is the National Museum of Computing. The museum picks up the story of computing from Turing's bomb and the subsequent Colossus machines and carries on into the development of computing beyond the war. Along with another replica bomb, the site also houses a recreated Colossus machine, the world's first programmable digital computer. Subsequent rooms look at the development of computer equipment over the following decades as data processing and storage rapidly increased in speed and decreased in size. Milton Keynes is located on the West Coast Main Line with direct frequent trains to London Euston, as well as direct trains to Birmingham Airport, Birmingham New Street, Liverpool, Manchester, Edinburgh and Glasgow. London Luton Airport, a major hub for low-cost carriers EasyJet, Ryanair and Wizz, is located about 30 miles from Milton Keynes, linked by hourly buses taking just under 90 minutes to make the journey. Birmingham Airport is the UK's 7th busiest airport with links to Europe, the Middle East and India. Trains run directly from Milton Keynes to Birmingham International a couple of times an hour, with fast trains making the journey in 45 minutes.